So right now we are looking at two big campaigns. First one is a campaign to cut off Crimea with our mid strikes, cut off all of the logistics in there. And also it tackles the logistics in all of the occupied territories of Ukraine. What I mean by that is that Russians, even if they still rely on tons of manpower, that is just small infantry groups, they still have to get them somewhere, at least maybe like 50 kilometers from the front line, so they could walk. And also, they need to have the shells and the fuel and everything like this to the battlefield. Because, as you know, I think Ben knows it much better than I do, but logistics, they win wars. And this is a major Ukrainian operation to cut off those logistics. Quite a couple of days ago, we were flying towards between Mariupol and Donetsk. That there is a big logistical highway in there that Russians use, and it's empty. It's like no trucks in sight, no even like civilian vehicles. It's empty. It's like a desert in there. So
Mm.
there is this. And there is a deep strike aspect of Ukraine's warfare right now that has gained huge momentum. And that is part of the reason why Russians have limits on how much fuel they could get on the fuel stations in their country, given especially that they are literally like a oil station country. That's the only thing that they do, actually. So we have been able to successfully hit a lot of oil facilities of Russia and a lot of industrial sites that are involved in the military aspect. And what we're looking at is, I think that we will leave Russia oilless and both for the military but also for the civilian population. And the idea behind that campaign is that we have to cripple Russian economy so much that it depends on the oil and gas industry so much that they will not be able to wage war economically speaking, because war is extremely important process, expensive process, stupidly expensive. And we just want Russians to not afford it.
Mhm. You when I was there in March, I remember we were spending some time together, and I had asked you. I said, "What are the chances of getting all of Ukraine back?" And at the time, you were a little more pessimistic. You said, "I doubt we're going to get Crimea of all places." And it's amazing how dramatically that has changed now. And a lot of most of my information lately is either coming from Dimco or from Frontline. It's you all are really dedicated to this battle,
Yeah.
this work, this
Uh, I completely agree. There is a very positive traction and a trend, but there is a significant difference between, let's say, cutting off the logistics and making those mid-strikes, compared to actually having an infantry soldier step his foot in Crimea. It's a very much more expensive operation in terms of the personnel. And given Ukraine, we don't really have a lot of infantry guys right now because it's so deadly at the battlefield for them that not so many people want to be infantrymen now. And I think all of the drone operations that we do, it's just the support for the best of the guys, the bravest of the guys in the infantry. And still, to get our guys in Crimea, boots on the ground, we are quite far from this, I guess.
Does the drone, I mean, I'm sorry to ask a question, but I'm just curious, hasn't the ground drones, which are pretty new innovation, have had an impact on that? Because I think you won the first battle with autonomously not too long ago. And I
Mhm.
know from my grandfather and my father that you cannot take ground without infantry, but maybe the ground drones are shifting that. I'm just curious.
Yes, definitely shifting, but it's 100% sure that the ground unmanned ground vehicles, they are not able to do the same stuff as Ukrainian infantrymen could do, and they are not able to do everything at once, and they have significant limitations still, technologically and also financially. Because imagine you would have like a million of UJVs with machine guns assaulting Russian trenches. If you would have that, that would be just pretty awesome, right? And you'd be able to clear a lot of trenches. But we are working here with very limited resources. So we have to still, Ukrainian infantryman is much more efficient in that sense. But definitely big shift
And Dimko, but you are back in.
in Lviv.
Absolutely. I mean, you're back in Lviv
Yes.
at the moment in Ukraine, of course. And is there a change in the way people feel about this conflict, though? Because, of course, it has been a very rough winter this year, of
Hmm.
course, as we heard. Already setting a lot of records on how cold it was, and that, also massive infrastructure strikes by the Russians, compounding into a pretty brutal winter. Is there a feeling that people are starting to kind of discuss more, I suppose, for Ukrainians, positive things about this war? The idea of being able to get control over Crimea or influence over Crimea. Is that kind of more in people's minds at the moment, or is there still this worry about the
Hmm.
ongoing and quite
Hmm.
intensifying strikes by the
I
Russians?
think there was a significant, like an emotional roller coaster. So a lot of highs and lows, and people in that amplitude, they get really caught up. I think that's a very big problem, psychologically, emotionally, mentally speaking. That today we are like, it's so over, and tomorrow we are so back. That kind of vibe. Uh, I think definitely right now people are more optimistic. I think the weather also plays a bit in that because there is no big cold, nothing is gray and not fancy. It's in the summer people love the outside, the summer, and it's definitely there is a significant impact to that that Ukraine is actually having a very positive dynamic right now. Ukraine is leading the initiative, and it's not like back in the day we would have to come up with new ideas to countermeasure what Russians are doing. Right now, it's like we are doing quite steady push, one big strategy, and Russians have to come up with new ideas extremely fast to stop us, to figure out what they could do better to not lose ground, not lose people, and not lose their oil facilities. So I think that's pretty hilarious and good initiative. What do you think, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
Last time you've been here in
Well,
Ukraine,
I would just add one thing first is that I guess it's kind of a question, but I would assume that there's a real urgency because of the winter coming up, and the more desperate Putin gets, the more likely he is to take out, you know, energy infrastructure that will be a significant support in the winter. But I'm also guessing that Ukraine has been thinking about that quite a bit and figuring out ways to protect it.
yes, definitely, but it's quite hard
But
to
yeah,
protect.
that's
It's almost impossible to protect because what we are
yeah.
looking at, Russia sends big combined attacks against all of the territory of Ukraine. Ukraine is an enormously big country, like it's 1,000 kilometers, more than 1,000 kilometers from the east to the west, and it's big vulnerability because Russia sends like more than thousands, 1,000 aerial targets over Ukraine, including hypersonic missiles, tons of drones carrying, each of them carrying 50 to 70 kilograms of explosives. They also send intercontinental ballistic missiles. And they also sent tons of decoy, kind of a false target drones to fool our air defenses. So it's a big, big, big layered air defense effort that we have to pull out. And still, even like if a couple of the missiles hit, we would face enormous consequences because Ukraine's energy security is literally on a brink each and every month of Ukrainian winter.
When Frontline visited Ukraine in September, this was still very much the focus, kind of, especially though at that time, intercepting drones rather than intercepting missiles. I don't know if it was the same when you were there, Ben, but certainly when I visited recently, drones were more of a threat than missiles. But it seems now that that's turned on its head.
Well,
Uh,
certainly what I just read in the news, it seems like one of the, I don't want to say one of the few things, but probably one of the most important things they need are Patriots, right? Because those can take out a lot of those missiles. And I'm hoping that the Trump administration is is supportive enough, which is a question, to get these to Europe, even at Europe's expense, so Europe can get them here. Because it seems like, to a great extent, as I said last time I was on, I mean, Ukraine, despite the existential crisis, is a superpower in the area of drones. I mean, I know that the U.S. produced well under 1 million this last year, and Ukraine is planning to produce something like 7 million. I mean, two, what is it, 7 million this year is their
Yes,
hope,
more
right?
than seven. Yep.
So it's quite, yeah. But I can tell you from you were asked this before, but from my experience, one of the things that was so impressive was how, in the face of what I would consider, just as something of a historian, what I would consider more of like terror bombing, like the V1 buzz bombs that just floated over London and just landed with much more accuracy, but still they're designed to break the spirit of Ukraine as much to destroy the infrastructure. But what I was really impressed by was just the heart. I know it's disheartening to have more and more of this going on further and further against a much larger country with a lot more money, but the synchronization on a human level, as well as on the way the logistics work, and the entire system is synchronized, so in real time what's happening, and you can track those statistics. Very impressive.
Yeah, and Dimko, how is that interceptor battle carrying on in Ukraine? Not just against drones, but there are still ongoing discussions, I believe, of trying to create a sort of Ukrainian or European equivalent to the Patriots, aren't there?
Definitely, because there is a big bottleneck on the American side, as Ben mentioned, and even if we have Europeans pay for the American PAC-3 missiles, Patriot missiles through Pearl program, still Americans refuse to sell it, and for us, it's a question of direct national security, because if we are not able to intercept Kinjal type of missiles, then our strategic sites will be destroyed. So we have to either anyhow acquire those through the situation in the Middle East, as there's a big operation to intercept drones there to help our allies, or through building our own. And right now there is a significant, big significant project of interceptor for ballistic missiles. And I think we'll see that in action this summer. I know a bit about the project itself, although it's kind of confidential and classified, but still, we'll definitely see that in action. And Ukraine has the technology and the bright minds to actually achieve this. And hopefully will be a much more reliable alternative than the Americans. In that sense, it's really hard to say that. But apart from this, Ukraine has fielded the technology and the tactics for using the drone interceptors. It's basically like uh, some of the prominent examples: American Merops, Ukrainian Stink, Ukrainian P1 Sun type of drones. They are working to intercept Russian Shahed, Geran type of drones, each of them carrying like those Russian drones carrying 50 kilograms of explosives, which is quite
Incredible.
deadly. It could do terrible things to Ukrainian residential blocks, and in my regiment, we have guys who operate things like that to save Ukrainian civilian sites, actually, because when it comes to the drones, they just send them en masse. They also get jammed a lot by Ukrainian electronic warfare, so they ram into residential blocks all the time because they are not even controlled, and Russians actually don't care what happens to them. Just send them our way. So it's a big problem. But we have
Yeah.
managed to
When
intercept
I
really a
was
lot of them.
yeah. When I was over there, shooting the documentary that I'm doing that focuses on Dimko and his wife Irina, the other things I noticed were just how quickly, and I think this is one of the other superpowers, how quickly Ukraine is able to innovate. If you take down a Russian drone, or if you have problems with a particular drone that doesn't have a certain capability, I saw certain innovations that were happening. Particularly the ones I saw were related to Starlink, and the fact that they cut off the Russian Starlink, and that was a huge factor. And then the other thing was, which is figures really into our plot, is the civilian involvement. I mean, I see it as in a certain sense, the way all the allied countries and America as well were working together. It was a bit more of an exit, more of a life and death crisis for Europe than it was for America, because we were sort of far away. But the idea of the civilians really bonding together the way do in Israel, the way they did in America during the the various wars, culminating with World War II, was pretty extraordinary, and that is one of the things that's going to win this war. And your wife has a huge role in that.
Yep.